Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. This is the place where you get both a coach's and sports dietitian perspective on topics important to endurance sports, including nutrition, training, and how these impact and fit into your daily life both on and off the race course. Your host, Coach Justin, certified run and triathlon coach and owner of Tabula Rasa Racing, along with Coach Katie, a registered dietitian with a specialty in sports nutrition and owner of Fuel to Run. Here at the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast is where your journey begins. Welcome, everyone, to episode 34 of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I'm your host, Coach Justin. Today, we're going to be bringing you our first installment of a new series that we've put together. It's called the Endurance Athlete Journey Athlete Stories. In this series, we'll spotlight other athletes, and they will come onto the podcast and they will share their stories with you. So today, we're going to bring you our interview with Chris Bonts, who is a senior pastor at Middleburg Baptist Church in Florida, and he will be talking about his story as an endurance athlete as well as a bariatric endurance athlete. So we hope that you enjoy this episode and that you will continue to join us on these other series where we'll bring you stories of real-life athletes who are just like you, sharing their stories with you and their journey. So thank you for joining us, and we hope that you enjoy episode 34 of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. This is our interview with Chris Bonts. All right, guys, so we have a special guest with us today. So this is the first time that we've done a guest here on the podcast. So I want to welcome Chris Bonts, who is the senior pastor at First Baptist Middleburg down in Florida. I met Chris when he did Ironman Florida. I had created a private Facebook group. It was a bariatric endurance group, not just triathletes or whatnot. So I wanted to create kind of like this special area that we could bring bariatric endurance athletes together to kind of learn off of each other, because it's such a nuanced group that we've talked before. You know, the digestive system is very different. So I wanted to bring in all kinds of different athletes so we can kind of see, hey, what works for you, and then we can track each other's progress and support each other as we go along this journey. So Chris is one of the founding members. When I created this group, I hadn't even had the chance to meet Chris, and I drove all the way from Virginia down to Florida to meet him and another athlete that we had in the group, and just for me to try and go down there and help them. But I want to welcome Chris. So I want Chris to share his story, and I'm gonna stop on the introduction right there. So this is Chris Bonts from Florida. Welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate all the work you guys are doing, and had a little bit of work with Coach Katie, and she actually helped me a bunch with my nutrition, and hoping to reconnect with her here in the coming weeks and get the ball rolling, because that's a very important part of the endurance athlete journey, and an area where I've got a lot of room for improvement. Just a little bit about my story. So I was an ectomorph growing up. I mean, I was 6'2", 160 pounds when I graduated high school. Couldn't keep weight on. Was an athlete in high school. Got married, had a kid, bought a house when I was 19, got married young, kids young, felt called to ministry. So I didn't start college till I was 25. So when I went to college, I was going to school full time, serving churches full time, both are very sedentary lifestyles. And I was raising one kid and then two. So I'm coaching baseball. I'm sleeping 4 hours a night. I'm living off junk food just to get enough energy to get through the day. And, real simple formula: an extra 100 calories a day translates to 10 pounds of weight gain a year. And at least that's what I've read, and I believe it. And so I gained about 10 to 12 pounds a year. And I spent 12 years in school, went all the way through, got my PhD. And so I graduated seminary weighing, 285, 290 pounds. And I kept telling myself, well, I'm going to lose the weight when I get done. Well, I found out it's a whole lot. It's much harder to lose it than it is to gain it. And so I would lose 30 pounds a year and gain back 35, and just failed miserably for the next decade. And so I was at my highest weight was 335 pounds, December or summer of 2021. I was meeting with my doctor and he said, Chris, you're pre-diabetic. You have high blood pressure. Um, and really all the problems you have are related to your weight gain. And we've talked a bunch. You have struggled to lose the weight and keep it off. I actually think you'd be a fantastic candidate for weight loss surgery. And I prayed about it and, really did a lot of research on it. And so looked into the different options for weight loss surgery. And and gastric bypass was the most restrictive when it came to diet and that type of thing. And I said, that's the one for me because I've cheated on every diet I've ever been on. I need a diet where I'm going to get sick if I eat something wrong. That's going to be the option for me. So Pearl Harbor Day, 2021, I had gastric bypass surgery and the weight just, like everybody, just started falling off. And my wife was a huge support for me. She's like, Chris, you're going to screw this up if you do it on your own. So she became an expert on this stuff. And she was, watching my diet, preparing my meals for me. And true story, after I dropped the first 100 pounds, she said, I think I want to do this too. And so my wife's also lost 150 pounds. So I'm down 152 total. She's lost 150. We've added decades to our life in this regard. So after I lost about the first 60 pounds, I started going to the gym and exercising because all of a sudden it didn't hurt. And I was an athlete in high school and I just hadn't been able to do any of that for a long time. And so I started going to the gym and I did, and I'd actually lost 100 pounds in a year before and gained it all back the following year. I was a statistic. But one of the things I did when I lost the weight was I was going to spinning classes because they were, low impact, easy way to burn calories, felt great afterwards. And so I started going to spinning classes at the YMCA. And then one day I was like, I swam one semester in junior high. I'm going to go swim some laps. So, it took me, I would swim one lap, rest a minute, swim one lap, rest a minute. It took me an hour to swim 400 yards. But I just posted my workout on Facebook and a friend of mine said, well, if you're going to swim and cycle, you should do a triathlon. And I said, man, I could never do an Ironman. He said, no, they have these things called sprints. You could totally do one of And so I started looking into it and I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And I had no idea what I was getting into. Didn't know how to train for one. I just, went out and swam a little further every day, rode a little further every day. And I hated running. And when I started, I would literally go into my neighborhood and I would run one mailbox and walk three. Or I would jog slowly for one mailbox and walk three. And I would just slowly build up. I couldn't run a mile without stopping when I did my first triathlon, but I finished and I'm looking around at all these people and there were lots of different body types, but everybody there was healthy. I decided this is going to be how I keep from putting this weight back on. I'm going to start, I'm going to do triathlons. So I found a couple of podcasts and listened, and all of a sudden I hear that there are coaches. So I went to the USA triathlon website and found a coach in Jacksonville and reached out to her and sent her a before and after picture because by this time I'm down 130 pounds or whatnot. I was like, hey, I know nothing. Would you be interested in coaching an old man that can't run 3 months? And she said, I'll tell you what we'll do. Let me train you for a sprint and we'll see how it goes. And if you want to do it and retain me as a coach, we'll do it. So she coached me for free for about 4 months. And I did another sprint and was more in love with the sport after the second one than I was with the first. And so, so we decided that was December of 22. So we met in January to kind of set some goals. And she was like, what do you want to do? And I said, do you think I could do an Ironman? She said, you can do whatever you want as long as your wife's on board with it, because this is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. And I don't know how to do anything halfway. I cannot be half in on anything. And I was like, well, let's do it. She said, well, if you want to do it, the best one would be Ironman Panama City. It's the end of October. So that gives us a solid 10 months to build up to it. And so we started out just building the foundation. By then, I ran a 10K without walking. I was really proud of myself and, was making some progress in the pool and just slowly developing a little bit of stamina. And so we just started building this, endurance foundation. And for the next 6 months, and then August of 2023, that was when the final leg of training it commenced and started working up, and I finished my first Ironman. I finished it. I was hoping to be under 13 hours. It would end up being 13 and a half hours, but I was thrilled that I finished. But a lot of struggles along the way, both getting used to exercising hard again, and learning to run when you're not in shape to run, and just getting comfortable with the pain of endurance running and that type of thing. Not injury pain, but just like the misery of endurance athletics. Learning to push through that. And so it was an ongoing journey. But that was nothing compared to, and I had tons of support. My wife she does not do any endurance sports. She is very disciplined with her diet. She's my Sherpa. She goes to all my events, loves it, but she has no interest in running a 5K. Every once in a while, she'll go walk one. And so I'll run the 5K, get to the finish line, run back, find her, grab her by the hand, and make sure she's not last. And so that's kind of our thing every once in a while. But the biggest thing for me when I got to the point where I was doing 2-a-days, and you have to do 2 workouts a day for 3-4 days a week and train for an Ironman. And then my workout started getting an hour and a half and longer. The hard part for me was learning to pre-fuel for my workouts, learning to eat good food. And fortunately, I had to do a lot of I had to meet with a lot of dietitians and get lessons on what good carbs were versus bad carbs, that type of thing. So I'd learned how to eat complex carbs as opposed to simple carbs, and learned to eat lean meats and get good carbs from good vegetables and that type of thing. So I was doing a really good job there. But when you add the endurance factor in, you can't live on 1,500 calories a day,
Right. Yeah.
and be an endurance athlete. And so Katie, you actually, when we only talked a couple of times, but you really taught me the value of pre-fueling for workouts.
Right.
Um,
I was
and
going to
eating,
ask you too, like, I feel like when we did our first, talk, or Justin and I kind of did like an intro, podcast where we talked a little bit about this, but I'm curious, like, what your experience was like, because you were saying you were talking to other dietitians. Were they like bariatric specific?
yeah. So
Yeah. I was just curious if they were like telling you need to go see somebody different, or if they were still kind of like trying to push you to continue eating that way, even though you were doing the endurance exercise. And
yeah.
yeah.
So I had the only way my insurance would approve my surgery, and I'm blessed. My insurance covered almost all of it. It didn't cost me a lot out of pocket, but I had to do 6 meetings with dietitians ahead of time to unlearn the bad habits and learn how to eat properly and those types of things. And then preparing me for what was going to happen, because you got the 30 days of liquid, and then you're slowly reintroducing foods. But I was eating on little saucers when I started doing this, and was probably taking in 1,200 to 1,500 calories a day. And all of a sudden that is not enough. And so, but when I would call them up, they're like, we don't know what to tell you, Chris. As far as you're kind of a unicorn. We don't have a lot of bariatric athletes that come back and say they want to train for an Ironman. And so I really was in uncharted territory. And I would talk to other athletes, and they would talk about the things that they ate and whatnot. And I couldn't eat those things because I would get sick.
Right.
And so it was a lot of hit and miss, a lot of trying things that didn't work. But I gradually got into this. I learned that good old fashioned oatmeal, about an hour and a half before my workout, was really good. And so, there were lots of times if I had a run scheduled for 5:30, get up and eat breakfast at 4, go back to bed, and then get up,
Oh,
put my
wow,
shoes on, and go out for a run, and then
Right.
protein afterwards.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd be able to get up and eat and then go
And then try
back
and
to
go back
bed.
to bed.
And then
Oh.
try to. Usually by then I'm like, I'm awake. I'm
Yeah,
ready.
I have no problem going back to sleep. My problem's always been getting to sleep. So that wasn't hard for me. And then, so learning how to pre-fuel helped a lot for my hour to hour and a half workouts. But then when it came time to do gels and sugary drinks, Gatorade endurance, that type of thing, it was awful
Right.
because bariatric athletes are people that have had bariatric surgery, especially that have done the gastric bypass. When you bombard your stomach with fatty foods or sugary foods, you get sick. And especially, if you're eating a gel and you're drinking fluid right afterwards, it's pushing it into your intestines, where that's where it gets digested. And then it creates all kinds of gas pain and everything else. So I was experimenting with all these gels and none of them were working. Goo gels didn't work for me. The Gatorade gels didn't work for me. I tried everything. Finally, I found the Martin gels
Oh, okay. So you're using
that
that.
aren't flavored. Those work great for me. And they're designed so you don't have to take fluid right on top of them. And so I found those worked really well, but there was a lot of gut training involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
I run, like I do my long runs when I'm on my own with a hydration vest, and I carry my gels with me. I carry Gatorade Endurance works best for me. Although the Mortal seems to work well, I just don't like the flavor nearly as much as orange Gatorade Endurance, and so that's a big part of why I don't do the Mortal as much. But I did test it out before I went to my last Ironman, so I could be able to drink on the course and not have to wear the
Right.
vest.
Because they switched over, didn't they, to Mortal? Yeah.
Yeah, they signed a new deal. The Ironman Corporation, when the Gatorade contract was up, they switched over to Mortal. When you're training for a big race like that, it's important to kind of do the due diligence to find out what they're going to be serving on the course, so that you can spend that time during training trying to train your gut, just to figure out if those products are going to work for you. If they're not going to work for you, then you have additional logistics that you have to try and figure out and manage, because you can't grab anything that's on course. So Chris did it right. I mean, he went through the process to figure out what they were having on course and then trained with those products to see if it worked for him. And it was so important for him to do that specifically because of the way his digestive system had been altered as a result of the surgery. So
you don't want to wait till race day to be like,
no, yes.
Most people don't. Most anybody shouldn't do that, but particularly someone who has had that
So I will
surgery.
say that it wasn't just trying them and not liking them. It was trying them and having really bad experiences. So there was a while trying to figure this out where, we have a couple of rail trails with bathrooms on them. And I would just, I was up to, 14, 15 mile runs, and I was doing mile out and backs because there were going to be times when, I was walking and just trying to get back to the bathroom without having an accident. It was that kind of stuff. And so and then the gas pain would be awful because of all that sugar. And so for me, I got to run with Gas-X, and
Interesting.
every hour I'm popping a Gas-X tablet just to keep that anti-gas medicine in my system. So because I'll be feeling fine, but I'll just get this intense gas pain, and for me it almost feels like I've pulled something in my ass.
Right.
I mean, it's that painful. And so for me, it was experimenting with the gels, and then experimenting with the drinks that would work best for me. And then I just figured out for me, Gas-X works great.
Do you experience like that type of gas symptom? Like, I know we're talking about GI stuff, but that's kind of part of this, isn't it? Like, it's kind of what every runner experiences, but especially when you're dealing with the surgeries and the trying to get that right. I guess my question is, like, outside of like the training, does that happen when you eat certain foods, or is it only while you're taking down?
If I'm, and to this day, if I eat, and the sad part is because I do so much workout, it's a little easier for me to cheat on my diet from time to time, and I will absolutely pay for it. It's like, hey, I'm going to eat this and see if it doesn't hurt my stomach this time, even though it did the last 15 times I ate it. Right? We all kind of do that. So I do have those moments where if I eat something I know I'm not supposed to, something that's really greasy, something that's fatty, something that's super sugary, I'm going to pay for it later. So, I mean, I've got Gas-X at home. I've got Gas-X in the truck. I've got Gas-X in my running vest. I've got Gas-X in my office. I'm prepared.
It has me like my brain spinning. Like, as a dietitian, I'm always like, what, like, is there something more? I guess, we might have to chat more about that after.
It wasn't just that. I mean, here's the thing. So I knew the Gas-X trick going into my Ironman, right? But here's the thing, regular athletes have GI issues on race day. Well, when I got to mile 6 of the marathon, I'd been ingesting sugary gels every 30 minutes or, so I had one before the swim, one when I got out of the water, and then every 30 minutes for my 6-hour bike ride. And then, every 30 minutes on the run, because I'm trying to take in 100 carbs an hour. And on top of that, I'm down in Gatorade Endurance. And so mile 6, I spent, and so I'm just, every athlete deals with it. I spent 5 minutes in the porta potty. And then I had to stop at every porta potty for the next 18 miles. It was awful. But I wasn't going to stop at that point. But that was a lot of sugar. Now I did not, just did IM 70.3 Augusta and didn't have any gastric issues. But that was just a half. So I'm doing IM Jacksonville next May, and I'm preparing for that. I'm hoping my gut will be a little trained, but I didn't have the gut issues. It was just I'd taken in so much sugar that day that
It can be
my body
a
was just,
challenge.
lots of runners get diarrhea, and that happened to me. And so even with training your gut, you're gonna have some issues, but you absolutely have to do the work ahead of time to figure out where
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
works for you.
I think that's a hard part too, because you mentioned like the half you were kind of okay, but it's so hard to know. Sometimes you can do a lot of prep ahead of time, but that, full Ironman, most people aren't doing that sort of in their training,
Yeah,
that sort of
nobody's
work.
doing a 13.5-hour
Yeah.
workout.
So it is a little bit of it can get, tricky, especially if somebody's doing it for their first time. I think you might have to kind of expect there might be some bathroom visits. And then over time, after you do more and more, maybe you get more, you dial it in a little better, but
And so for
it's
me,
hard. Yeah.
yeah, and I started with the full before I've done 2 halves. And so, we've just figured out, next time, in the future, I'm going to have to get some of my carbs on the run from pretzels and,
Yeah, that's
Martin's
probably good.
really good bar that's not as
Solid,
sugar.
maybe. Yeah.
And
Like,
so,
or like more solids on the bike,
yeah. And
because you
so,
have to
yeah,
think,
so
the gut is also being shaken around. There's a lot of things happening when you're running, like
right.
the bouncing around, the gut is a little bit, it's just easier, especially as we first start in the exercise to eat. And then the longer we go, the more we tend to have gut issues because the blood flow is reduced and it just takes its toll after hours of, running or
Yeah, you're
biking.
absolutely right. So yeah, so for me, it was a matter of getting more solids on the bike that
Hmm.
would be digested a little slowly, getting into my system. Because a regular athlete's stomach with the reduced blood flow, things get smaller and they're not digesting it nearly as quickly. So and I don't know what kind of studies have been done on a gastric bypass patient, but my stomach is, smaller than my fist.
I'll
And
tell you, there hasn't been very many in endurance athletes, because there's
But yeah, so there's a lot of trial and error, but you kind of get into it where you're like, okay, some days are going to be bad just because my body has decided it's not processing this food the way you want it to today. But I find that the longer I do this, I'm kind of in, year 4 now. The longer I do this, the better I'm getting at it. And my body is being trained to handle those things. So I rarely have issues with the gels. And I do spend a little more for the Martin gels because they work. They're definitely not the cheapest option. Although if you're signed up for an Ironman, you get 20% off on the price if you order from
do
their
they have
website.
those out on the course too for the Ironman?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
Ironman
so
gives them
you
away.
at least wouldn't have to
I've been so tempted. They're so expensive to run with a garbage bag and just scrape them off the last table and take.
like stuff them in
Um,
your pants.
exactly.
Like, I know
So,
they are. I have tried them and they are. I have bought some and they are expensive.
so yeah, for
Yeah.
me, it's been just going back to my journey. It's been, they talk about, some people talk about the 3 disciplines of triathlon, and some people talk about the 4. So you got swimming, biking, running, and nutrition. For me, I've discovered that it's 5 because rest and sleep, I will undermine my training big time by not paying attention to my sleep habits. And so that's as big a part as everything else. I think even more so because we're limited in how we're able to take in calories. We don't have as much room to undermine our training with poor sleep habits and that type of thing. So I've really tried to
That's a good,
begin
interesting
thinking about
perspective. Yeah.
5 the 5 disciplines of triathlon. But I love it, And it's been great for me. This is helping me not become a statistic and helping me motivate other people.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious too. Like, I wanted to go back just because it sounds like you did the sprint and then you did another sprint, and then you decided, like, okay, I'm going to go to do an Ironman. There wasn't like a lot, like, so what was that? What was the thought process there? Because I mean, most people, including myself, like when I did triathlon, it was kind of like, I'm going to do, well, I did it in college. So it was like Olympic distance was what we ran, but I wasn't like immediately like, I'm going to do an Ironman at all. So I'm curious, like, what was it?
It's my personality type. I mean, so like when I left for Bible college, I mean, you can be a pastor without a graduate degree. I knew my first week of Bible college, even though I was 25 when I started, I knew I was getting a PhD because that was the terminal degree. And, you know, I don't know how to do anything halfway. And so when I started looking into Ironman, I was like, the 140.6 is the terminal degree. I'm starting with that one. Because I had to do something big that would force me to be all in. And I'm glad I did. It's been, I've had like, I think 6 or 7 people in my church that have now had gastric surgery. Several other friends have taken a triathlon. None of the gastric bypass patients have, but, several other people have started, exercising and doing that because they saw me doing that. So it's just been a fun way to, encourage people to get healthy.
Yeah, inspire other people. That's kind of neat.
Because I wasted almost 25 years being morbidly obese and unhealthy. And the thing was, that was my normal. I didn't know I felt terrible because that's how I always felt. And now I'm in, I'm in a better place physically than I've been since I was, my early 20s. And I'm in a better place mentally because, if someone had told me, my anxiety and depression would not be issues when I started working out 10 to 15 hours a week, I just started doing this a long time ago. That release of I've never experienced a runner's high in my life. I still think that's a myth. I've been like mile 15. This is the greatest thing ever. Has never happened. But I absolutely, if I get up and knock out a run first thing in the evening, mood the rest of the day.
Yeah, you still get the endorphins. You just don't have that.
I get the endorphin really. Never experienced a runner's high.
I know that's
so there is something that's interesting that I want to point out is that Chris's experiences with how his body reacts to the abundance of sugar is completely different from my experiences with when I take in too much sugar. We've had the exact same procedure done and we're into the exact same sport. So I think it's really kind of interesting that when Chris takes in too much sugar, he gets gas pains. But when I take in too much sugar, it's almost like, I get that really high like glucose spike and then the crash. And so, I get really, really sweaty and kind of dizzy. So it's like a really high sugar crash. So even though that we've had the same procedures, we can't use the same nutrition plan because, I mean, I was never a big fan of the Morton. They're really, really thick from what I can gather from it. And so when I started,
weird consistency too, like
they do. And there's just something, it's like, I'm the kind of person that really hates pudding and stuff like that. And like cottage cheese, I don't like it. I don't like the texture. So when I started to take in more gels, when I was trying to refine my nutrition plan, I went to the UCAN gels because they're thin. So they have a really thin consistency. So like with Chris, I don't have to drink to like wash them down, but they were a slow burning and a slow absorption kind of nutrition product. So I didn't get that really high spike that I would normally get, like if I ate like some scratch jummies or something that had a really high sugar content, but it was quick burning. So that's the difference between that slow burn versus that quick burn. But even though we've had the same procedure done, we have completely different reactions to sugar.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, and I'll say this. I'm like that every other time of the day. If I eat simple sugars for breakfast and I'm not immediately working out, my blood sugar will drop precipitously 2 hours later. And I'm like, I've got to get more sugar just to level it out. And it just I end up, this snowball effect. And so I have to
like you're just chasing that all day sugar.
Yeah. But for some reason, when I'm running or on the bike, I don't have that issue.
Yeah.
That's the only place I don't.
Probably just because you're absorbing it and it's being utilized so quickly by the body. But when you're just sitting there, there's nothing happening other than it's just causing a big glucose spike. Yeah. That should be a topic all in its own. It's like what's happening with blood sugar.
Right.
With the
Yeah.
post surgery, it's something I've seen time and time again. That
Mhm.
is a common thing, but I do find it fascinating. I mean, I'm talking with both of you and then other people that I've worked with. It is so individual. Like everybody I've worked with has, yeah, there's some similarities, but there is a lot of like differences in what people will tolerate. And I do think that's important to mention because, there's no like cookie cutter, like this is how you would fuel exactly for everyone, post surgery. So it's just something to I think it's just an important thing that Justin brought up too.
Well,
Right.
I mean, and it's just like, exercising and that type of thing, just learning out. When I started running after, and this took almost a year before it stopped, I would get this thing called the xiphoid. It's in the upper part, right below your diaphragm, the
Uh-huh.
xiphoid. I would get intense pain.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the xiphoid process or what
Yeah,
that's what it's called
yeah.
or something like that. And I'd have to stop running. I would not, it felt like
Hmm.
someone had punched me, where you lose your breath, and you get the wind knocked out of you. I would feel pain there and I would have to stop running. It took almost a year, but I don't have it anymore. But it took almost a year for that pain to stop. And apparently that's more common with gastric bypass patients and just because of all the stuff that's done.
Yeah, the surgery and everything.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But
Yeah.
so we just had to, okay, I hit a wall here. I'm gonna walk and at least get some time on my feet and come back tomorrow or the day after. I'm trying to run back to back days very often. And just process that. I will say this, the good part of, you know, the one positive for me not exercising for 25 plus years is I'm still setting PRs at 53. You
That
know,
is
yeah,
that's a nice
yeah.
bonus.
I texted Justin earlier today. I was like, "Hey man, I set a PR last night at this 5K downtown corporate run. Nobody my age is setting PRs for their 5K. You know, so all the guys that I was running with are like, yeah, I'm not setting any PRs. This might be the fastest time this year, and I'm like, this is my best time ever.
That's great.
So it's super
That's
motivating in
true.
that regard.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like you hear people who did start a little bit later, they set more PRs, but also there's like some longevity.
Mhm.
Like I've been running for years, so my joints might wear out more quicker or something, those things will happen. But when you start later, you still have some fresher, like maybe legs. I don't know. Like, I don't know how
No,
much truth there is to that.
so when I started doing this, I went to a cardiologist and I went to an orthopedist and the orthopedist is like, man, your joints are in great shape. They basically haven't been used a whole lot. You have the knees and the shoulders of a 35-year-old because you just weren't using them a lot with exercise. Just use good form and you're going to be fine.
No, that's
Uh,
good to hear.
yeah,
I don't
my
even want to go to an
cardiologist.
orthopedist. I'm
Yeah,
afraid of what they
that's
would
my
tell me.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
and he sent me to a therapist. They did a whole, survey. They had me do all these exercises and watched and sent me to a cardiologist. And he was like, "You dodged a huge bullet, man. Your heart is in great shape. Go as
Mm.
hard as you want." You know,
That's great that you went to all those specialists, though. I think that's also something, maybe worth like I'm glad you mentioned that. I think it's just something worth mentioning. Is it maybe good for people in general, but maybe after having the surgery also to check in with especially if there's a heart history or other joint concerns and things like that, to go to a specialist and maybe just make sure the heart's okay, the joints are
yeah,
okay. Although I do think you have to be a little bit careful because you'll find those like orthopedic people who are going to be like, running's bad, don't do it,
Yeah.
kind of negative about that. But if you find the right person and you can
right,
kind of get the all clear, like everything looks good, then I think that's great, because then you kind of know going into it that you're pretty
yeah.
healthy and ready to go. Or at least get some blood work done, check your cholesterol, maybe a stress test. I don't know, but
Well, and
I
having
think that's a
a
good
coach
point.
is huge. Um, I would have absolutely having a coach, and not everybody can, has the budget to do that. But I did hire a coach that was a very accomplished triathlete, and she has protected me from myself. We don't set PRs in practice. This is supposed to be a zone 2 workout. And even when I would get ankle pains, that type of thing, I would give her the report from my therapist afterwards. And so she would write it into my plan. All right, doing 10 minutes of these ankle building exercises before you run today, those types of things. So if you can get a coach, there's lots of information out there. Just pay attention to and talk to your doctor and those types of things. I didn't realize I had weak ankles from playing basketball in high school. I'd rolled my ankles, tore ligaments, the whole 9 yards. I just from walking, I would injure my ankles when I was heavy. But I didn't realize you could strengthen your tendons and ligaments, through exercise. Well, I thought once they were messed up, they were messed up for life. And now my ankles are stronger than they've been in decades. And I never had ankle problems. But I keep doing the ankle exercises to make sure that doesn't rear its ugly head again.
Yeah. So you mentioned like the coach, and I think that's a great thing to mention, just because it sounds like that coach kind of helped you because you kind of hired. It was a her, right? Like a she. So you hired her right away, pretty much when you decided to sign up for that Ironman. And I would argue maybe she was able to help you get through that and not like burn out, not like get in your way, or, I think that's an important thing about hiring a coach, right? They can kind of keep the guardrails a little bit.
I'd have spent, it had been 2 months working out, a month recovering from injuries.
They're not making it at all to the Ironman, possibly. So
there's so much science involved in building your base to train for something as hard as an Ironman, and I don't know it, and I don't have time to plan my own workouts. So it's nice to have someone else do it and then hold me accountable for doing it.
Right. Yeah. That's absolutely
I know, Justin, you do that for all your athletes. You not only set their plan, you're checking in on them if they're missing a workout lovingly. Hey, man, what's going on?
What happened?
There's been many a workout that I completed just because I didn't want to get a text message from my coach, JC Pinto, at 10 o'clock at night. What happened to your swim?
Yep.
There have been times I'm running at 9:30 at night because I knew I was going to get a text message. So
there you go.
That accountability is good for me.
Yeah. And then your wife, you mentioned your wife has been kind of a big support. You said, did she actually have the surgery as well, or did she just follow the diet piece? Because I didn't catch that.
She went and had this exact same surgery, exact same doctor. That doctor owes me commission. I've sent him 7 that have had bypass, or a couple of them have had sleeve. Yeah, no, she had the surgery 6 months later and dropped the weight. And so together we've lost over 300 pounds, and there's mutual accountability there.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's helpful because it kind of is like your friend. There's like a saying about like the people you hang out with, So you're kind of found like you have your wife, and then you have like the triathlon community, and I think that kind of helps you, helps you stay in that, in that zone and keeps the weight off and everything else. And I think that's really important, people listening. And I think most people who have had the bariatric surgeries are obviously probably joining running clubs and kind of with like-minded people. But I think if you can find people that support you and are supporting you in your surgery, post-surgery as well, that are, not only the professionals and your run buddies or your triathlon buddies, but also other people who are going to support you with that and maybe hold you a little bit accountable with that too, or just be there, for you if that's other people who've had the surgery or family members. But I do think that's like a huge piece of the post-bariatric journey.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, a lot of people are just embarrassed and they don't want to tell some people tell people they've had surgery, or they're embarrassed about their weight gain, and they're trying to lose weight and they just don't want to talk about it. And you rob yourself of support by being secretive about it. I know someone that had surgery and did not want to tell anybody she had the surgery, and didn't even tell her husband knew, and that was it. And she's gained a lot of the weight back because she'll go to family functions and they're trying to serve her cake, or those types of things. And like, my family knows not to do that,
right?
And because I shared with them, what I was on my journey, and so they've been there to support me.
Right. Yeah.
And having my wife and I, we submarined each other's diets for 25 years. I knew the exact buttons to push if I didn't want to eat healthy for dinner. I'm like, you worked all night. You probably don't feel like cooking. You just want to order pizza, or and she would do the same thing to me. It only took one of us to make both of us stumble. And so now that we're on this journey together, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, so you're both kind of that is interesting, like, that perhaps if you don't tell that story of if you don't tell people, then they don't know. And also it is, that's a deeper discussion about the food, some of those things with food and all the social pieces that go with food. But yeah, I think that's a good reminder that at least telling a few people that can really be in your corner. If you don't want to tell everybody, that's okay, but having that support is really important. So I just wanted to bring that up because you did mention your wife, and it seemed like she was just such a big piece of that whole journey for you. And
She's
then
a
I think
huge,
also like being like a pastor, it seems like, you also, I mean, you were mentioning you had some anxiety and depression before, and now you feel like you have a lot of energy, like you just have a lot of vitality. Like, I'm sure that brings, like, part of that job is just being in front of people. Like, you have, I think that probably helps a lot in your job as well, because I can't imagine like feeling very motivated unless some people can fake it a little bit, but I don't like, and you go to the church and you want to feel like, like, I don't know, like you want your pastor to have energy and be like, enthusiastic and happy, right? So I feel like that's probably brought a lot to your job as well,
yeah,
I'm guessing.
everybody's job's hard and everybody wrestles with the difficulties associated with work. I'm not unique in that regard, but it is kind of hard when anxiety or depression starts to rear its ugly head to get everything done because you just want to shrink back from everybody. And I'm in my profession makes it difficult to do that. And ironically, that's the worst thing you can do when you're struggling with anxiety and depression is to retreat. You need to be around other people because
Right.
being
Yeah.
by yourself, solitude makes it worse. But again, of course, I'm speaking from obviously from a Christian perspective. Body and soul are absolutely intertwined, and so if your physical body is unhealthy, it's going to affect you spiritually. And if you're spiritually, emotionally not in a good place, it will affect you physically because you won't pay attention to your diet, exercise, those types of things.
Mhm.
And so, just trying to take care of your whole body. That's been the biggest part of this journey for me is, I was doing a really good job up here and here, but I was neglecting everything else and actually undermining here and here because I did that. So I just encourage everybody, for your mental health, you need to do. It's not just for your physical health.
And you don't necessarily have to do a full Ironman to get the
No, you
benefits.
don't.
I
Yeah,
do
no,
think.
you don't.
No, no, you
Yeah,
don't.
I think like.
I'm thinking of the weight loss and doing. You don't even have to do the gastric bypass. You just have to, you know, eat healthy, and not be consumed necessarily with what the scale says, but
Right.
eat healthy and move. Those two things will have a huge impact on
Yeah.
your health.
And it is
But for
hard
those
though.
who,
I mean, it's hard for people to, like you even mentioned, you kind of had this yo-yo effect with your weight and you've tried so many things. And I think that really resonates with a lot of people, especially those who've had the surgery, is that kind of struggle of continuously trying different diets or different things and maybe losing a little bit of weight, but never really keeping it off. And it's not necessarily any fault, placed on you or in those individuals. It's just very hard. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I kind of think, I'm thinking it is sometimes easy to say move more and exercise because I feel like I say that a lot. And I wish I could just instill some of my like motivation and things on like just give people a little piece of that,
Yeah,
from me. But
and so, I mean, so for years I had two closets. There was the closet, the closet full of clothes that I'm going to be able to fit if I lose 20 pounds that never got worn. And then there were the clothes I could actually wear on the other side of the closet. And but the thing that and this is true with a lot. Every person that gets to the point where they need bariatric surgery, we all had a very unhealthy relationship with food, right? And this is why bariatric surgery is such a godsend and such a great tool. Because telling someone like me who was 150 pounds overweight to start eating healthy and to restrict your diet so you could lose the weight. You're going to have to eat fewer calories than your body wants for a year and a half, 2 years. And so you're always going to be hungry. But it's the equivalent of saying to an alcoholic, hey, go to that bar and you can have one beer, but that's it. That is not that does not a recipe for success, right? But nobody gets as morbidly obese as I was without having a very unhealthy relationship with food. And that's why the gastric bypass surgery was such a godsend for me. It was a tool that just allowed me to take control of my life. And then once I lost the weight, I was bound and determined I didn't want to become a statistic. And here's the good thing about, training for Ironman. I got an extra 1,000 calories a day in the bank. It's much easier to it's much easier to stay under my caloric needs for the day if I'm working out 10 to 15
I think
hours.
that's true for everybody because I'm like, I've been so active most of my life and, kind of always because I've been active forever. I mean, there's been only a few times I haven't been. I feel like that's probably what's been the biggest thing in helping me be able to stay, leaner and not have, weight gain. Like obviously also being a dietitian has helped me because I have the knowledge, but you can have the knowledge and not do it, but I do think, that helps.
Person has the knowledge.
Exercise is nice because you have that little extra calorie in the bank that, hopefully you're eating healthy, but you might have a little wiggle room. But yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that Chris said that I'm really glad that he did is he described the surgery as a tool. Now, if you have the surgery and you gain this tool, you have to learn how to use the tool. So it's not good enough just to have the surgery and then not know how to use it effectively to get you where you want to go. I would argue that probably most of the people that don't learn how to use their surgery are the statistics. They're the ones that end up gaining the weight back and they have the revisions and then they have to go in and have second surgeries and everything else because they never learn how to effectively use what they've been given. And I think that's a valid argument. I think for most people, even outside of the bariatric realm, is that, for athletes, if we don't know how to use nutrition to support our performance, then it doesn't matter if you're gifted or if you know how to perform, you're already not maximizing that potential. And I think the way that Chris described the bariatric surgery as a tool was so spot on. And it is really an accurate way to describe nutrition in general. But, for the uniqueness of the bariatric patient, knowing how to use what they've been given is vital. And sometimes it's really hard for us to do it on our own because there's so much information out there. And there's an emotional component that I think that I really like how Chris said that was that, you can tell the alcoholic to go into the bar and only have one drink. It's not going to be a successful scenario, just like Chris said. But I want to caveat that with saying is that, but alcohol is an option for most. You can just not drink. We can't just not eat.
Exactly.
And so people that have this unhealthy relationship with food, it's so easy for somebody to say, yeah, calories in, calories out. You're just going to have to eat less than what you want, but there's more to it than that. Because food it's life-sustaining. Alcohol isn't life-sustaining. Drugs aren't sustaining. But even though I would say the addiction is probably very similar, but the way that that addiction interacts and intertwines into our lives is very, very different.
Yeah.
It's hard. Yeah, I think that's where it gets challenging for people is how do you outside the tool of the surgery, but you're still going to have all of those same things, in your life potentially, like the social engagements and the, I don't know, there'll be other things that kind of come up. And I guess that's true for somebody who's drinking. There's going to be things like that you might have to navigate. But I think it is just knowing how to use that tool effectively and knowing that it is a tool and it isn't going to solve it's not just having the surgery alone is the only thing you have to do.
Right.
There's a lot of hard work that happens afterwards. And then also,
it's not the easy way out.
Yeah, it's not the easy way out from everyone I've talked to. I've never gathered that. And I know when I was doing the surgery consults, oftentimes I would get the feeling that somebody kind of felt this way. And I would say, it is not going to be easy. This is going to be hard after. It's not the easy way out. I don't know how much they believe me or not, but, so I do think that's important to mention. And then also so that's not and then you decide to take also another hard, you're adding on the Ironman, which kind of, the fueling and all of that piece. And now you're sort of meshing together this post-bariatric diet and then this fueling for your Ironman. And there's a lot of conflict, in those two recommendations. Like you kind of have this one, bariatric dietitian saying don't have sugar, and now you kind of have to have it as part of the training. And I know that's also hard, kind of post-surgery for people who are engaging in endurance sports. Did you find like that was a real like struggle for you to okay, like to have the sugar, or were you just kind of like, I know I need this for fueling, or was there any sort of struggles there?
It only took bonking a couple of times to
Right.
decide, okay, I'm going to have to figure this out. And we're just going to, and listen, I didn't know to run close to bathrooms the first time I did. So I was very thankful there were trail runs, there were woods nearby.
Oh, I've been out there when there's no bathroom. It happens to me too. I haven't had the surgery, so it's a common
Some of
problem
my
for
favorite
runners.
skirts are buried along my favorite running trail because I had to stop, it may be too much information. But yeah, I just, you just get to the point where you when you bonk, you're like, okay, I don't want to do this again, because if you bonk 8 miles from your car,
And you have nothing to eat, you're in trouble. Yes.
It's not a pleasant experience.
No.
There were a couple of times I was on bike rides and I just had to pull over to the side of the road and call my wife. And I'm like, hey, I need you to get in the truck and I'm 30 miles away. Can you come get me? Because I'm not making it back. Or I've had to call her on long runs. I had an Apple Watch, thankfully. I was able to go, you got to come get me. So, it is what it is. But, and again, every athlete's different. What works for me and what works for Justin may not work for you, but it might. So I would absolutely talk to other. You don't have to travel this road by yourself, but just keep experimenting, and you'll figure it out. Just take good notes when you do, and run things by coach, and you'll get there.
And maybe hire a dietitian who knows. That is a problem too. There aren't a lot of individuals out there who kind of have both specialties. So I'm not like tooting my own horn here, but I'm just.
But this is why I gave your number to Justin back when we were talking. I was like,
Right.
dude, I've been trying to find a dietitian, and I'm talking to her, and she's like, well, I've worked with hundreds of bariatric patients before I started doing this, and I'm like, this is the one. I told my wife, like, we got to hire her, and I was like, Justin, you got to talk to her. She knows us, and so yeah, you're even a bigger unicorn than we are.
I don't know. I feel like maybe that's true because I've done some of my own searches and I'm like, it's hard. And I probably should put more out there on the internet, that I do that, but I'll have to do it.
Yeah. And I tried to talk to the dietitians that trained me before the surgery just to prepare for this life change. I called them up. Hey, what do you think about this? And their response was, you just need to keep eating on the saucer and small portions, and you don't need to be up in your caloric intake. And they just turn their nose up at the possibility of me eating one of those sugary gels. They didn't have the room to process the questions I was asking. So you really are.
Experience a lot of people have, I think, is from what I can tell when I talk to people who do find me, they're like, I tried talking, and nothing against I think the bariatric dietitians do a very good job at what they're doing, and they really are trying to keep people, using that tool, right? And like keeping on path. Mm-hmm. And it is a little bit out of their wheelhouse when they get somebody that's so active. And so it's just like we all have some specialties, and sometimes, that's what they're doing. But so they're not the, I mean, I know some people who do the bariatric diet, diet consults and working with those individuals post-surgery, and they do a fantastic job. Those individuals are not usually skilled in also like sports nutrition because they're not also doing that. And so it's just important to keep that in mind, I think that's a very common experience people have.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I didn't know anything about endurance sports when I started. People don't just go and start reading up on endurance sports. So they just, that wasn't in their wheelhouse, and there weren't a whole lot of, they're just trying to get their bariatric patients to eat healthy
and to keep the weight off and be
just,
a positive,
habit. The last thing they want to do is encourage them to eat something sugary or, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a channel on their soundboard to handle those extra questions.
Right.
So you're a godsend in that regard. And even the month we worked together previously helped me immensely. So I'm looking forward to reconnecting and really taking my nutrition to the next.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Well, I do have to head out in a couple minutes. So
yeah, so
I don't know if
there's
you want to keep talking with
Yeah, there's one thing that I want
Okay.
to ask Chris, and then we'll just kind of wrap this up. So,
Okay,
Chris,
sure.
if you come across somebody who was in your position when you first started, hey, I've had bariatric surgery, I'm trying to be more active, I have an interest in triathlon, what is something that you would tell them that would encourage them or share some advice to help them get started on their journey? What would you find to be one of the key things that you've learned from your journey?
It's the old adage, Rome wasn't built in a day. And I couldn't run a mile without stopping 6 months after my surgery. And so I would go out and I would ride 5 or 6 miles. I would swim one lap at a time and rest for a minute. And this was someone who knew how to swim. I swam competitively as a kid, but it wasn't like I didn't know how to swim. I was just that out of shape. And this was after I'd lost 100 pounds. So you just keep flinging mud at the wall and it sticks, and you get to where you can do a little more and a little more. And then you kind of get comfortable with being out of breath, because it means you're pushing your body and your body's going to be able to adapt. So it just takes time. I can assure you, nobody that is listening to this is in worse shape than I was when I started. Nobody was, it's just, you just got to, you can't change where you are. All you can do is start there.
Yep.
Yeah, you guys start somewhere, and that's
But you just keep
that's
stacking
part of the
workouts.
process. It's like part of
Keep
the
showing up.
yeah,
Keep
just keep
showing
showing
up.
up. Yeah.
And you may never run a 5K as fast as your neighbor, but you can run a 5K. You be the best you, right?
Mhm.
And you may never finish a triathlon, but if you're out there trying, you're doing 10 times more than the person that's staying home watching TV.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So even the person that doesn't finish, and I got a friend that she keeps trying to finish an Ironman, and they keep pulling her off the course, and she just keeps keeps showing up to the starting line. Right? She's like, I'm gonna finish one of these, and she's an inspiration to me.
Yeah.
She's a bariatric patient. She's an inspiration to me because she keeps showing up,
Yeah.
and she is 10 times healthier and happier than if she wasn't doing that.
Mhm.
And I'm just someone who's just getting started. Just enjoy the process. Get out and have some fun. And you're going to meet tons of people that are going to be super motivated by you showing up. I talk to people that haven't had this surgery, and I start sharing my story, and they're like, that's amazing. And I walk away from there like, yeah, I am pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I like doing
You,
this.
you don't know it until,
It's a-
until you
it's an
talk to other
encouragement.
people. 'Cause
Yeah.
you're just doing your thing, and then
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it was great having you on, Chris,
Yeah.
and like
Thanks.
chatting with you. And I remember you telling me a little bit of your story when we first worked together, but it was great to hear it again and kind of a little more details.
Yeah.
This has been fantastic.
And by the way, I'm easy to find on social media. If anybody's watching this and you want to talk or swap stories, I love to talk about
What's your like Instagram or what? You can
So
say it
I'm just Chris Bonts on Facebook.
on Facebook.
If you message me on Instagram, it might be months before I respond.
Oh, okay. So
Chris Bonts,
Facebook's the way to go. Yeah.
Facebook is the way to go for me.
Right. Awesome.
I can only handle one social media account at a time, or Strava. You want to look at really poor workout results, you can follow me on Strava. And so that's a good way to, if you want to feel fast, go and look at all my runs on Strava.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for joining in. I really appreciate it. And one of the things that I'm going to do is, in the show notes, I'm going to put the name of the Bariatric Facebook group that we have out there that Chris is a member of, and, a number of other of us, that are endurance athletes that are bariatric patients, as well, as just a way for you to find that support system. Because Chris made such a crucial point that I want to reiterate, is that the support is key. Without the support, it's so much harder for you to accomplish what it is that you're trying to do. Losing weight is hard. Becoming, athlete, an endurance athlete, is hard. And you're trying to do both of those things at the same time. The support is so important and it's so crucial to your success. And so I really want to make sure that it's easier for people to find us. But yeah, Chris, I'll make sure to have your name in the show notes, and we'll have any kind of social media links there for others to find you.
Mhm.
But thank you, Chris, for joining us and for sharing your story. It's truly an inspiration.
well,
Thank you very much, man.
Thank you.
We'll talk to y'all later. Have a great evening.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you guys for joining us on episode 34 of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I want to encourage you to leave us a review. If you are enjoying the content that we're producing. Wherever it is that you're listening, please leave us a review and comment there. That will help us with some context so that we can see how we're doing. We also have the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast group on Facebook, so feel free to join that group as well. That will allow us to build out a community of other endurance athletes where we can learn and support each other. And it'd be a great place for you guys to reach out and interact with us directly. You can suggest other episodes, other content, other topics that you would like to have us discuss, and eventually get to a point where we can open up some Q&A. For all things coaching related, if you'd like to reach out to Coach Katie, she's at fuel2run.com, and I am at tabularosoracing.com. I do run coaching and multi-sport coaching. Katie does run coaching and nutrition coaching for all sports. Feel free to reach out to us if you have questions, if we can help in any way. But again, thank you guys for joining us with episode 34 of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I'm your host, Coach Justin, and we look forward to talking with you again soon. See you next week. Listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Feel free to leave us up to a 5-star review on iTunes and Spotify, because leaving a review really helps others like you find us. Visit the podcast website for other episodes of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast at enduranceathletejourney.buzzsprout.com. Have questions or comments about the podcast? Send Coach Justin and Katie an email at theenduranceathletejourney@gmail.com. For all things coaching, visit Coach Katie at fuel2run.com and Coach Justin at tabularosoracing.com. Again, thank you for listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, and remember to find joy in the journey.